Welcome to Joint Session, Diverse Voices in New York State Cannabis. On today's episode, my guests are Dasheeda Dawson from Cannabis NYC and Jeffrey Garcia from the New York City office of Nightlife. Please also hang on to listen to my second segment with Wei Hu, Esquire, and a partner in the Lenox Hill Cannabis Company. But first, a quick spin around the news. A new Gallup poll shows that 9% of Americans report consuming cannabis at least 10 days a month. Consumption remains higher among younger adults and men. Geographically, the highest rates of cannabis consumption are found in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, as well as other states like Wisconsin and Illinois. The lowest rates of cannabis consumption are found in Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama. Interesting to me, as I'm preparing a future episode on alcohol prohibition, this lineup of states very closely mirrors the wet and dry states from 100 years ago. I guess the more things change, the more they don't. In Massachusetts, Governor Maura Healey announced that her administration had disbursed $2.3 million in grants through the Cannabis Social Equity Trust Fund. A total of 50 grants went to social equity cannabis business owners in 28 different communities. The fund is aimed at encouraging people who were disproportionately harmed by marijuana prohibition and enforcement to join the cannabis industry. Congratulations to those recipients, Governor Healey and Massachusetts. Our last item comes from researchers from Michigan State University and Texas A&M. They conducted a study that included 223 dogs who either had a known exposure to THC or whose urine tested positive. Although their dogs got busted, 68% of owners denied possibility of exposure. 32% of owners either admitted to getting high with their dog or didn't realize they had a dog. On a serious note, the common symptoms in the dogs included a fast heart rate and hypertension, as well as coordination issues, urinary incontinence, and vomiting. Please be careful with your cannabis. Store responsibly. Thanks to Cannabis Wire for that news. Subscribe at cannabiswire.com. That's one word, cannabiswire.com. Enjoy the rest of the show. I'd like to welcome two of the coolest people working in New York City government, Dasheeda Dawson, founding director of Cannabis NYC, and Jeffrey Garcia, executive director of the Office of Nightlife. And yes, that is an actual position with New York City. Dasheeda, how are you?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Jeff?
Hola, hola. Great to be here. Great to be with you, Herb. Great to be with Dasheeda.
All right, so we'll start. Dasheeda, can you tell us a little bit about Cannabis NYC and what its goals and missions are?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, Herb, I'm the founding director of Cannabis NYC. I was appointed in October 2022 by Mayor Eric Adams, and he launched Cannabis NYC in the New York City Department of Small Business Services to lead the on-the-ground outreach, public education, workforce development, business services, and total city policy development as it pertains to the legal cannabis industry. And he did this launch in conjunction with the first retail dispensary licensing application that also was released by the state. And we've been rocking and rolling ever since. I would say my number one job is to make sure that New York as a whole is able to achieve the goals of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. I act as a city advocate on behalf of the city of New York and its constituents to ensure that we are showing up where we need to show up in the application pool, but as well as in the ancillary businesses that will support the overall development of the industry, and aligning many agencies, over 125 city leaders, to our overall mission, which is to be the number one global hub for cannabis industry excellence, grounded in equity and education across business, science, and culture.
That's awesome. And I imagine one of the agencies that you're aligning with is the agency that Jeffrey heads. So, Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about your goals and your mission as far as the Office of Nightlife?
Hey, yes. Well, I am Jeffrey Garcia, the executive director of the Office of Nightlife, and I am the second one to hold this position. My predecessor, Ariel, had been in this position since 2017 when the office was started under then Mayor Bill de Blasio. And I got into this position late last year in October of 2023. And just a little bit of history about me and what led me to be in this position. I retired from the NYPD. I worked in city government, left 10 years ago, then opened up a restaurant. And then on top of that, also started an advocacy organization called the New York State Latino Restaurant Association. So I come at this position through various lenses, the law enforcement piece, the advocacy piece, and stakeholder, right? So I really understood what the industry needs, what it's about, and then obviously this office, right? And what its purpose, right? Is we're a non-enforcement liaison between the nightlife community and city government, right? Like Dasheeda said, we are advocates for the industry. So we are here to support, we're here to help. And with a lot of the new changes that have come through this office over the last month since I have been here, one of them is bridging that relationship between law enforcement and the industry, right? This industry for years has been disproportionately impacted by law enforcement and how they deal with this industry, especially in communities of color and Black and brown businesses throughout the city. And we just want people to know that we are here, reach out to us. We're here to help them and guide them and help them navigate city government.
Oh, well, thank you. And I did want to get into backgrounds a little bit. And as you said, I think you're uniquely qualified to lead this position. And Dasheeda, I know you also come with a long professional history of working in cannabis. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you've done prior to this position, especially the work that was done in Portland?
Sure. So, yeah, I'm one of the few government regulators in cannabis that have switched jurisdictions. And I mean, switch jurisdictions by not getting fired. It's a little bit of shade. It's a little shade. But yeah, no, I'm a relatively long time cannabis advocate. Going on nearly 10 years, 15 years as a cannabis patient. I'm a certified medical cannabis patient here in New York, which I finally can be. I actually left New York in 2015, beginning 2016, to seek a jurisdiction that I could be a cannabis patient with dignity. Landed in Arizona and very quickly got into the industry, crossing over my strategic management and business experience from corporate Fortune 500 companies into the space. And I pretty much work with every single type of cannabis business in every single legal market, whether it's hemp or cannabis across the country. In 2020, I landed the opportunity to become the quote unquote cannabis czar for the city of Portland. I would say that my biggest claim to fame there was really actioning and implementing things that they'd had in statute and in policy, but had never actually seen to fruition. They have a cannabis tax revenue that, through ballot initiative, is supposed to go back to the communities most harmed. And when I arrived, 80% was still going to law enforcement, which in some ways can be seen as a slap in the face for when we think about the criminalization of cannabis. And so I came in and quickly turned that around. And by the time I left, more than 80% were going to community reinvestment. And we also launched the first cannabis emergency relief fund for cannabis businesses because, as you all know, during 2020 with COVID, there were a lot of relief programs, but cannabis, due to the scheduling on the Controlled Substance Act, it is not qualified to receive anything from Small Business Administration or any federal relief. And so really was very excited at some of the equity initiatives we were able to move forward. We still struggled on the fact that we were leading the state. Oregon as a state didn't have any equity initiatives. And we really struggled when it came to Black, Indigenous, and Latinx ownership, particularly Indigenous in the Oregon jurisdiction. They were being very much overlooked and disenfranchised in the process. And so we got to bridge a lot of gaps there with education, and was really proud of the work that I was doing there. But I'll be real, Portland was like riding a bike with training wheels, and New York City is a motorcycle without a helmet right now. So it is a very different environment. I'm glad that I'm from East New York. I'm from Brooklyn and I'm from here. And so at the end of the day, I'm core New Yorker, and it's kind of don't start none, won't be none. And I kind of approach this job that way because I know it's a difficult one, but I think we're tackling a lot of really big things all at the same time. I'm thrilled to be in arms with this fight with Chris Alexander, who has been my brother in this work since 2016, 2015. And I think that we are unique in that we have the advocates that were on the ground legalizing now in charge. And it's been hard, but I definitely know we all understand the assignment. So that feels good.
All right. Excellent. And Jeff, I'm not sure if you know that both Dasheeda and I are from East New York, so I'm very proud of that as well.
Yes, I do. Yes. And I tell you, I don't want to this to pass me by, but I've been like a groupie of Dasheeda quietly since she got this position. By the way,
Jeff.
Dasheeda, I mean, I'll say it publicly. I just think she's amazing in that she brings so many diverse views to this, having that business experience that she has, and obviously the knowledge that she has in cannabis and already be working in it, and how much she loves the plant. So I just want to let you know that publicly. And I think that those perspectives, like understanding the business part of it, of this, really can really help people, and it's showing. So.
Absolutely. And that's where I wanted to go. So if I'm an East New York resident or resident of any of the five boroughs, and I'm thinking of applying in the future, or if I'm fortunate and already have received a license and I'm looking for that next step, what programs are there in New York City that can help me sort of get to that next step?
I would say our office works really hard in ensuring that people who are interested in getting licensed or supporting the industry get the education they need. So we launched Fast Track for Cannabis Entrepreneurs, which is a free 10-week entrepreneurial course. Folks get certified by the end, and it's taught by cannabis experts across the country. So not just New York based, whether it's Jesse Horton, who has one of the few Black-owned licensees in Portland, or the Dank Duchess, who is well renowned for being a phenomenal hash maker, also from New York. We actually went to Stuyvesant together. Shout out to her. But the point being is that we do want people to get a diverse education, and we want it to be up to the minute or up to now. Cannabis changes so much, and so Fast Track helps us do that. And then across all five boroughs, we've trained cannabis account managers at our business solution centers. This was a project that you would think it would happen automatically because it already existed in terms of the business solution centers, but it took us over a year to get the contracting right, get the right people hired, so that now you can go in any of these solution centers across all five boroughs and talk to a cannabis account manager as you are preparing for an application. We've done a ton of technical assistance there, or you've already submitted an application right now. Maybe you're in the queue. We could talk about it as controversial, and you're getting asked to remedy some things by the Office of Cannabis Management. We can help you locate documents, reach out to the right agencies if you need to. For a lot of people trying to, move to the next level, they're also trying to figure out financing. And so we're really thrilled that this year we'll be opening our Cannabis NYC Loan Fund. It is a project that we've been working on with the New York City Economic Development Corporation since 2022. And we are finally at that point where we can start dispersing loans with a partner. That is one of the things that I'm really proud of, is that New York City put the money first as opposed to waiting for cannabis tax revenue to be able to support businesses.
So now, both the state and the city continue to commit to, quote, having the most equitable cannabis industry in the world, right, unquote. So how does that manifest itself in the city?
Jeff, I don't know if you might want to jump in here. We've partnered with the Latino Cannabis Association a lot, and Jeff is very humble. I'm a fan of his as well. He's definitely a founder at heart, and has been part of really ensuring that this conversation is multicultural, multilingual. They've been a partner for our Five Borough Cannabis NYC Coalition and our Liftoff Cannabis NYC tour. So I'll pass the mic to you because I definitely want the perspective of organizations on the ground that have been doing the work. And that's where we first met, to be honest.
Yes, thank you. And I started that association along with other like-minded business owners. I'm originally from Washington Heights, and Washington Heights has its own history with cannabis, as Dasheeda may also know, right? It's for many reasons, right? Negative and positive, right? In terms of like arrests, it was like one of the areas most affected by arrests of cannabis at one time. And then also very well known for its cannabis, right? By many folks. I guess it came to me and my co-founder of that association to mind, obviously in dealing with the restaurant association, because we realized that a lot of the folks in the industry, in the nightlife industry, restaurant industry, at one point or another were negatively affected by the war on drugs in many aspects, right? Including cannabis.
You mean the owners themselves?
The owners, yes, and these owners and eventually were able to get things like certificates of relief from disability, which allowed them then to go get liquor licenses and other things. And we understood, well, hey, I know you may want to hide that past, but maybe now you could take advantage of that and apply. And a lot of them were Latino business owners throughout the city, but many of them obviously from Washington Heights, because that was where like my core home base was. And, many of them right now are in the queue to get licenses as well. So at least for the retail licenses. And then some are also in the queue for cultivation and manufacturing. So listen, I'm really happy about the work that I did there. I will tell you, it did come with a lot of heartache. I got a lot of backlash initially because of my previous law enforcement career. But I think in the end, people realize I came at this with a good heart, right? And really just wanting equity for the folks that I knew were most harmed, right? I grew up in the same neighborhood that some of these folks were applying, and folks that I knew. I grew up right next to them. I'm post an academy where it was like the mecca of marijuana at one time. So I knew obviously what they have gone through. And then during my time in law enforcement, I also realized how these effects came to be and how they affected Black and brown folks. So I'm really happy where we've gotten. I'm really happy with where the Latino Cannabis Association is going and many others. And I'm glad now to have been a small part of this new industry. And I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like 10 years from now, 15 years from now.
That's exactly where I wanted to go now. Looking to the future, how important do you think this industry will be for New York City? I mean, from an economic perspective, from a tourism perspective, from a nightlife perspective?
If you look at the nightlife industry and what it means to New York City, it's a $35.1 billion industry, employs over 300,000, people in New York City. And all those jobs have come back now, right? So, I mean, adding cannabis to this is only going to further, bring those numbers up. But I think that there are some challenges, right? That we have to figure out, and I think the city's trying to do the best they can, is these illegal shops and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'll let Dasheeda talk about a little more, but I'm really looking forward to what this will look like in terms of the nightlife aspect of it, and once consumption lounges and consumption licenses start coming into play.
Yeah, no, I think Jeff covers one important sector. The fact of the matter is that cannabis industry is a global multi-trillion dollar industry when we include hemp and understand that it has more than 50,000 uses. And so New York City absolutely has the ability to be the cannabis capital of the world as it pertains to not only the cannabinoid base of the business, that's what we all kind of know about the flower, edibles, and tinctures and products that are consumables that are sold at dispensaries. But New York also has the ability to capitalize on the textiles that cannabis as a plant can also make. And that means we have a multi-billion dollar opportunity here, both in the entrepreneurial and the generational wealth that can be created, as well as on the workforce and community investment side of things. To me, the ceiling is no ceiling. It's sort of the sky is the limit here. But it's only if we decide that we're going to, really treat the plant and the people with integrity. I think we're the first government to acknowledge that our past laws were wrong, and we're doing the best that we can to kind of keep those people most harmed at the forefront. And that means beyond giving them a license, but even in affordable housing, are we
Mhm.
putting them in more sustainable places? Are we also educating around the medical benefits so they can capitalize and reduce the number of pharmaceuticals that they're using? Like a holistic approach to our benefits is what we're tackling here at Cannabis NYC. And New York City has the ability to be that epicenter for the world.
There's another sort of benefit that I don't hear discussed often, but I imagine, and you two are, I think, are uniquely qualified to sort of answer this. But there's like a war benefit, right? I mean, there's got to be, the freeing up of police resources, the freeing up of district attorney resources, court, resources, and not dealing with cannabis arrests. Is that something that is starting to be experienced in the city?
I would say from our perspective, it's an immediate impact. In 2021, the day after the passage, which we're now past 3 years, on March 31st, April 1st, NYPD released a memo that basically said their entire approach to investigation was going to change. We're not going to use the smell of cannabis as a suspicion. We're no longer going to, I guess, investigate if we see someone with a joint and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I do think that it is impacted that way. Of course, we never anticipated necessarily this level of proliferation of illegal stores. And
Hmm.
so on the sheriff's side, we've been really seeing a lot more resources used as we deal with those stores. But I think that that's a temporary situation. It's usually the case in other jurisdictions that there's a lag period between legalization, law, and regulation policy and framework to be created. And so when that gap closes, like in Canada, you start to see no longer the need to enforce out, if you will, illegal stores. But yeah, I think at this point, we know from our data that there should be a shift not only in the police and enforcement need, but also in incarceration need and how much we're
Hmm.
spending and keeping people incarcerated for cannabis related crimes. That is a plus for the coffers of New York State for sure.
And if I may add to that, and obviously I deal with NYPD on a consistent basis here, and obviously I understand that they have completely shifted as well. You know, like Dasheeda said, like this is no longer an issue for them. But obviously, you know, the illegal shops are a problem. However, if you just look back at history, if you look at when liquor prohibition was done, it took about 15 years for that illegal to legal to transition. I don't see this taking that long.
So what is it that you're seeing today in New York City, right? Is it as out of control as some say? I know the numbers that I've seen very quickly, they were using about 2,000 illicit stores. All of a sudden, the next day, it seemed like the newspapers were saying 8,000 illicit stores. Is it that bad? Is it improving, right? There's increased enforcement from everything that we hear. New stores, and we know new stores are opening. So is it improving any?
Yes, I think one, let's be real. The media in New York, I got two people that, if I gotta be real honest, I want to give them the East New York stare down. Two groups of people, if I'm being real: the lawyers, the internet lawyers, and the media. We are struggling. I have come from more mature markets, but I did expect that the media in New York would be more mature about it. Still referring to these business entities as pot shops and very tongue in cheek. So, as far as I'm concerned, when I read most media stories, I'm including the New York Times on this. AP gets it wrong. They still don't use the right wording. And the language of cannabis equity has evolved the overall language around cannabis, and they're not there.
Hmm.
We're in what I would consider a very negative media cycle where there's a lot of exaggeration. The electeds don't help as well. And so our official number is around 2,500 in New York City. We know we have the majority for the state. We also have closed nearly 200 stores through the efforts that Sheriff Anthony Miranda and the Joint Task Force has taken that approach within the confines of what New York City can do. We're in the middle of negotiating with the governor's office and the state's Office of Cannabis Management about what local enforcement could look like after some additional delegation. But yeah, it is improving in the sense that we are actually closing stores. It just feels like the drop in the bucket, and I think what we'll need is a real overhaul. And we're in that critical time this year. We don't want any more landlords to think it's okay, but I do think we have some confusion. I've been out with our licensees that are provisionally approved in our jurisdiction to meet with landlords, because now that we do have some enforcement and we do have some media on the increased enforcement, landlords don't know who's legal and who's not when they're coming to try to get into contract. And so we've been trying to do our best to help demonstrate who the legitimate businesses are. But I also think, lastly, just opening the recent application cycle, we're going to see a lot of those who were jumping the gun and trying to get a store open without a license be rehabilitated, if you will, figuring out the ways that they can actually do it the right way. And so that plus enforcement changes, I think by the end of this year, we'll see a completely different landscape because we have to. This is a critical year for New York. We have to be able to really see these legal stores thrive. And I think the competition, perceived competition, of course, is these, stores that are screaming from the mountaintops that they have cannabis for cheap. But I also just want to caution that there is still a very large percentage of the underground market that is still underground and watching what's happening. And they're waiting for their right opportunity to try to make that transition. And we don't want to scare them either. So we've been doing our best to take equity and education approach to enforcement, not create the war on drugs 2.0.
And I agree with Dasheeda, especially for those folks underground still. I talked to a few folks that I know from my old neighborhood that, I've just been trying to tell them, like, listen, get into this legal market. The moment you have a chance, get in. You have a great underground business. You want to leave something for your kids. You want to leave something that can still be in existence way beyond you. You're going to have to go legal. And, they're understanding it more and more. And I think that, having advocates like Dasheeda and people pushing and many others, I think people will come around.
Is there planning currently going on, looking at what the future will be for cannabis in the city? I think the consumption lounge license probably won't be available, I would say 18 months to, maybe 2 years, but it is coming. There's this concept of a limited, smaller consumption lounge that's adjacent to a dispensary, that kind of thing. There's, cannabis events. I would imagine there's going to be conferences, tours. So, what's the planning that's going on to make these, safe and fun and profitable for the businesses that are doing them?
Well, yeah, I was like, oh, the planning. Um, Right now, if I'm being perfectly frank, we're working again on language and also true understanding. So I'll correct you both because I know that you mean well, but every time we mention consumption lounge, for example, DOH gets up in arms because they only see one type of business. I'm grateful that our MRTA says on-site consumption, so we can really imagine a plethora of different types of businesses besides the lounge where consumption of cannabis will happen on site, whether it be a workspace, a yoga studio, or in fact, a nightlife experience or a lounge. We want all of it. And Cannabis NYC has been in task force with DOHMH to ensure that on the smoke side, we are abiding by our Smoke Free Air Act, which is actually stricter than the state's Clean Air Act. And on-site consumption licenses for the state are going to be exempted from the Clean Air Act. Right now, that isn't necessarily the case for the city. So we're working really hard to create an environment in which there are some carve outs for the cannabis licenses that will exist in the city. And we're focused on harm reduction because let's be honest, and I know Jeff could talk to it, especially when we think about nightlife. We are already seeing on site consumption, indoor smoking, or outdoor smoking
Oof.
happening, right? It does happen. I was at Summer Jam and I felt like I was at a consumption lounge, except it was inside UBS Arena. At the end of the day, I think we could be better at mitigating any risks or harms to secondhand smoke if we were able to get in there, inspect, educate around the different types of smoke, ways that which you can reduce the particles that are emitted, proper ventilation. There'll never be a foolproof, we reduce it to 100%. And we know that. But I'd much rather, and I'm thinking about myself as a mom of an almost 21-year-old, which means he could go to the same spots I could go to. I would much rather my young adult be in an environment that has a pre-inspection, a post-inspection, that is doing something to improve the chances or reduce the risk of secondhand harm than him just going to a spot that doesn't have anything. And so that's what I think about. And so we're really working hard to make sure it's not a complete ban. On the other side is food. Everybody believes, we should be able to have a made for order, framework. And unfortunately, the federal government's definition of adulterated food includes infusion with cannabinoids. And so by that law, our DOH will never support that. But we're working to ensure that we can, look again at the carve outs or the loopholes. So prepackaged goods. If you have a sit down restaurant experience, what can you offer that will be infused? Well, maybe your sauces are prepackaged and infused, or maybe the seasonings, things like that, dressings, ways that the consumer can choose and can buy the prepackaged item without it being in food made to order. So we've been doing a lot of brainstorming in advance of the state's licensing, and our hope is that we'll be ready. I played basketball too, so I always kind of got a little bit of reference. And shout out to South Carolina and their undefeated season. But I feel like I'll be ready with that, when that bounce pass comes through from the state, to make sure that New York City is ready to apply for the licenses and also have guidance and city policy in place. Because right now, to be honest, sir, we have no city policy stated around what we feel about cannabis. I know our mayor wants to capitalize on tourism and nightlife, and that all is part of the on-site consumption piece of it. But we do need a framework that's going to reduce risk and harm in order for us to feel good about it. And that's what we're working on.
And looking at the way this administration and the mayor really wants to work, I mean, look at what we're doing with the city of Yes and taking a lot of ambiguity out of our zoning restrictions, right? I think the same thing needs to happen here. People are doing it already, like Dasheeda said. People are, smoking in establishments. Why don't we take that ambiguity out of it and actually regulate it properly so that, similarly to liquor license and stuff like that, so people don't go underground and then you don't have a way of controlling it. So I just think that the city's ready probably to work on something like this and really get something done, to take that ambiguity out of it. How do we get the state and everyone else on board, to really do this together?
My last question, as you both know, the Office of Cannabis Management has been under a lot of pressure from the public, from the press, even from the governor. In your view, what have they gotten right? And what can they still do to improve the situation for the applicants, for the individuals that you guys speak to?
I think that New York has gotten a lot right. I think when people try to rag on New York, it's clear that they have a limited scope of the industry, and they haven't traveled very far. And by very far, I mean across a bridge and a tunnel to Connecticut and New Jersey, who legalized within the same time space and yet are struggling with their diversity ownership numbers. I can shop with integrity. I can shop with purpose here in New York City's market and in New York's overall market. And I was just in Massachusetts, which has been around for 6 years and has had a lot of intentional activity around equity, one of the first social equity programs in the country, and they still struggle with licensing and ownership. And so out the bat, our social and economic equity data does not lie. We are understanding the assignment and it's being met. And I would say I'll give us an A when we have more than 65% of licenses given to those who are designated social equity and social and economic equity. And so that's number one off the bat. We have to say that. We cannot shop that way in Connecticut, in Massachusetts, in New Jersey. And I definitely could not shop that way in Oregon. To be frank, I only have one Black-owned licensee in the city of Portland. But I think it's just critical for us to kind of point that out. Illinois had really specific goals of doing this, and they were really held up by litigation. New York absolutely fell under some of that, but 4 months as compared to 18 months, 2 years that held up Michigan, held up Illinois. I would say we're even doing better there. And despite the most recent case against Leafly, where the judge's ruling wasn't in favor of the state, we're still 3-1 in 2024 for other lawsuits that have come, again, against equity. And so I do think we're doing better at defending what we're we're trying to build. Here's where I think we need some work, obviously. One more thing I will say. The supply chain itself has a lot of small business, small farmers, and minority ownership in a way that other markets do not have. However, the retail segment is where we see the dominance in terms of minority ownership. And as a person that knows the industry, that is the least profitable part of the supply chain. So I'd really love to see more Black, Indigenous, and farmers on the cultivation side of things, us be more clear on training or transitioning those individuals into cultivation licenses. And then I'm not going to lie, very confused by the bottleneck of our only 40 processors in the state. This feels like a real gap and something that maybe our city could help with in terms of training. It does require a bit more of the science side of things, depending on which level you are. I like that we have a processor 3 that allows you to come in and just be a brand. But I do think that the real product development piece of it is missing diversity, and that will only improve the market too.
Thank you, Jeff.
Obviously, I have to wear my, government hat right now, but if I
Absolutely.
can transition that real quick, if I can digress to when I was at the Latino Cannabis Association, I thought that maybe things could have gone a little differently, right? In terms of how these initial licenses were given out, right? Like, I had this vision when we first started the Latino Cannabis Association, when we were first talking to folks, way before one license was given out, or even way before the whole Justice Involved licenses card applicants was announced. Like, I thought they should have opened up the whole system and then let folks apply, and then folks that fell under those categories would get preferences, but at least you would have had like the whole ecosystem already working in its place. But I think that they're doing the best they can. I think that we have one of the best programs out there when it comes to equity and inclusion for Black and brown folks. And again, I will say that I think that having someone like Dasheeda there leading the way, this will only get better.
Can I add one more thing? I guess I also failed to mention that I think that we did a lot of things in theory. The concept of the social equity fund, having the state put up $50 million to grow a larger fund. The theory was there, and I would say directionally, we haven't seen anyone do that, any state do that. The challenge is always implementation. And I said that earlier, that with Portland, they had all this statute, all of these things, all the right words on the right papers, and the right people signed off on it, but no one to implement. And unfortunately, I will say that I do think that the DASNY implementation of this program was not good. And we have to acknowledge that. And it's partly because they didn't have competency in the cannabis industry. They thought, oh, this is like any other industry, we'll treat it as such. And unfortunately, that's the challenge with government. We can't. We're creating new structures, we're innovating. And that's also what I'm proud of with New York, is that OCM has been very innovative in the programming and the approach. The compliance and training mentorship program was the first where you could see a real legacy to legal on-ramp. And we have to be proud of that. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that we haven't shown the money yet. We still have a lot of people trying to figure out where do we get these resources. And to Jeff's point, there were a lot of things that it was happening in real time, flying the plane while, building it. And I think we actually have to, build smaller planes, take it up in the air, and decide if we want to add on to it, as opposed to the other way.
I love that. But there's no doubt about it. That was the whole Dazzling thing. That got people so like enthusiastic about, oh my God, we're gonna get money. They're gonna really help us. And in the end, it didn't come to fruition. And the parts of it that did, a lot of people were just so like heartbroken by it, because it felt like, and again, I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble for using this word, but it seemed like the state was the most predatory of them all. When it came to some of the stuff with Dazzling.
No, and I think that DASNY itself deserves an entire episode here. I think.
Bring me back for that, please, Harry. Because I got words. I got words.
The concept, and I think that one of the advantages of being a little bit later as far as lifting prohibition and starting down the legal path was that the state was able to look back at the experiences of the other states and try to come up with some remedies that would address the shortcomings that we saw in other jurisdictions. And obviously access to capital, real estate, et cetera, was one of the largest, if not the largest. And so the idea was right. Maybe having it outside the agency, maybe having a different agency would have been better. But this is not the kind of program that DASNY was competent to address. So.
But the theory behind it, like Dasheeda said, was great. Like if that could have really happened, it could have really helped a lot of people.
Well, and there was, I think early on, I think there was, there were some people who realized that, DASNY was not able to do this. I would have preferred to have seen, some low interest loans go out, some grant programs. $50 million could have gone a long way. That was the original amount that the governor put in, especially with that first cohort of 150 licensees. But, we got to deal with the situation as we have it.
Yes.
And I'm sure that there are a lot of smart people working out how to get this done. Very fortunate to have had Dasheeda Dawson, again, the founding director of Cannabis NYC. And Dasheeda, thank you. Where can people find out more about the work that you're doing?
You can follow us, of course, on our newsletter. It's not social media yet, but our newsletter, The Plug, launches soon, and you can go to nyc.gov /cannabis to find out all of our various programs and sign up for The Plug.
All right, thank you. And Jeff Garcia, Executive Director of the Office of Nightlife. And where can people find out more about the work of the Nightlife office?
Thank you so much. With us, reach out to us via social media at nyc.gov. You can also email the office at nightlife@sbs.nyc.gov. And obviously, and call you can call us, you can email us. And again, social media, we're constantly monitoring it, and we can get back to you through there as well.
All right. Thank you very much. In this next segment, we hear from Wei Hu, one person who is proof that nice guys don't always finish last. Welcome. My guest is Wei Hu, Esquire, Mr. MRTA Law himself. Wei has represented a number of clients who have gone on to receive their cannabis licenses from the Office of Cannabis Management. However, today he is not here as an attorney. He's here as a licensee himself, as a partner in the Lenox Hill Cannabis Company. Welcome, Wei.
Good morning, Herb. Thank you for having me.
Please share with us how you arrived at this historic time as one of the first legal dispensary owners in New York State. What's your cannabis story?
Well, it's the stars aligned. I've been a consumer for almost 3 decades. I learned my cannabis culture from Wesley University. And fast forward to 2021, I was fortunate enough to have cannabis legalized and regulated under the MRTA. At the time, I was working at the City of New York Department of Social Services, where I helped administer public benefits and services to low-income households in the City of New York. When I'm thinking about sort of how I could really, have a new pathway, I realized I had a lot of experience dealing with regulatory and administrative law. That combined with the subject matter of cannabis, I realized it was something that'd be a good fit for me, so I could really help other people also obtain licenses and start their cannabis businesses.
And what did your family think as you sort of made this transition, right, from having this, steady paycheck with the city to going and starting your own specialized practice?
I didn't break it to them overnight. That's the main thing. It's you prepare as much as you can. You have a plan. You understand the rules. You understand the regulations, and then slowly you pitch it to them. I think, as always, I have 2 young daughters, so this was a giant leap for me. Opening the business is not easy. It requires a lot of capital, and so it was really a household decision to move forward with this.
So Lenox Hill Cannabis Company is on the Upper East Side. What's been the reception so far from that community?
At the very onset, the community board, I think there was a lot of fear and apprehension. They didn't know what a legal licensed dispensary would look like. A lot of the people who showed up at a community board meeting voiced opposition because they thought there'd be on-site consumption, which is not the case. They saw sort of the tawdry, illicit, non-licensed stores strewn about the neighborhood, and they didn't want another one of those. I assured them that we would be nothing like that we would ensure that no one under the age of 21 enters our store, that we'd be discreet, professional, and also show a positive image of cannabis. We have many tinctures. We have a lot of balms. So a lot of people don't necessarily need to combust or smoke cannabis in order to receive its natural health benefits. So now we are in almost our third month, and reception's been nothing but overwhelmingly positive, both for consumers as well as our neighbors.
Well, good for you. Congratulations. So someone who is kind of curious walks into your dispensary. What's that experience going to be like?
It's going to be a whole new world, hopefully. It's going to be the very antithesis of sort of, I think, the unlicensed stores. We have over 850 different products available for consumers. We have a wide selection of, distilled oils found now in vaporizers or vapes, they call it. We have edibles. We have cannabis flower. We have a wide selection and assortment and different things, for different people and different intentions. A lot of our customers come in to really help them, reduce anxiety, help improve their sleep. And so there's, products that cater to them. Of course, there's other, consumers who want to feel a little more intoxicated from the THC effect. And we do have more infused and more potent THC strands is there as well. So we try to offer a little bit of something for everybody. We're fortunate to, really be sited in a very residential community. We're near the hospitals. Mm-hmm. We're near the universities. So there's different people who want different experiences and have different associations with cannabis. And so I think we're very fortunate to try to offer everyone a wide selection.
So now there are a lot of diverse voices in New York cannabis, and you've been one that has been measured and always looked at issues in context. So that said, what would you say to the Office of Cannabis Management, to the Cannabis Control Board, even to the governor, and how they approach the rest of this year and really the rest of this rollout?
The first thing I want to say is to both OCM as well as CCB is thank you for your public service. There's a lot of opportunities in this industry where, people can make far greater paychecks than in public service right now. But yet we have a dedicated core of public servants trying to really do their best to administer a whole new industry under a whole new program that has tremendous public stigma still against it. They've been starved of funding. What I've heard from Ashley Southall's New York Times article is that they only had 32 application reviewers from the city of New York. In my experience, when we had them reviewing public assistance and food stamp applications, there were almost 4,000. 2024 is definitely the banner year. We've definitely had some challenges in working with DASNY and launching this industry. But really, I think that we really finally have the first time we have a clear runway for this industry to succeed. So what I anticipate is over 400 other dispensaries being online end of this year. And we have a very robust supply chain from the cultivators and processors. So nothing but a banner year this year.
So you're optimistic.
You could say that. You always hear the challenges of New York State. And I think finally, the clouds have been, it's been clearing. We're finally going to have a little more blue skies in terms of us to operate.
So I wanted to ask, for those licensees and applicants that are still hoping to participate in this market, what advice would you give them at this point?
Wow, it's a great question. While you're waiting, don't sit still. You don't necessarily need to hire, but you get your game plan right. You can visit vendors. You can visit your cultivators, visit your processors, potential processors. You could see how other dispensaries are doing their floor layout. You get all your paperwork in a row. Trust me, there's an endless list of things to get right in order to start your store. You can never be overprepared. That has been my experience. Even as an attorney, launching my own store, there are still things I need to get right and course correct for operations. There are still more vendors. There are more cultivators, more processors I still have not yet met. So there's an endless list of things you can do while you're still waiting to launch your store.
All right, Wei. Well, thank you very much for the time this morning. I very much appreciate it. Best of luck to you. Best of luck to your clients. And thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed the show, Please share with your friends. If you didn't, please email me and let me know what I can do better. My email is listed in the show notes. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Joint Session is produced by me, Herb Barbeau, with additional production and engineering by Matt Patterson, with Rebecca Malpica on digital marketing and social media. In addition, thank you to Cannabis Wire. You can find us on Instagram at jointsession.pod, that's one word, jointsession.pod, and on LinkedIn at Joint Session Podcast. Thank you.